December 16, 1944. Ardennes Forest, Belgium. A low fog clings to the valleys, thick and cold. The frost stiffens branches, snaps under gloved hands. The air carries the faint tang of diesel and damp soil. Silence dominates, but it is a silence pregnant with motion. The subtle hum of engines, the scrape of metal treads on frozen earth, the occasional cough of a sentry. On the ridge, German officers move like shadows between trees. Maps are unfolded, ink smudged by cold, hands trembling from both chill and anticipation. They speak in clipped tones, words chosen for clarity, not comfort. Their confidence is absolute. American forces, they believe, are slow, hesitant, incapable of improvisation under pressure. They have prepared for a quick, decisive strike, a blow that will shatter morale and end resistance before it truly begins. Far below, in the valleys, the Americans are assembling, unaware of the scale of the storm about to descend. Snow crusts over their boots. Rifles are stacked, tanks idling, generators throbbing quietly. There is no panic here, only focus, only the sound of breath and the rhythm of a heartbeat. Above all, the forest holds its secret. It will witness the first shots, the chaos, and the consequences that the Germans cannot yet imagine. History pauses. Seconds stretch. Every decision, every miscalculation, every hesitation will echo far beyond this frozen morning. The BY late 1944. The war in Europe had reached a tipping point. The German Reich, once the master of blitzkrieg, now faced a series of attritional defeats stretching from Normandy to the Eastern Front. The Allies had established a firm foothold in Western Europe. The beaches of Normandy, stormed in June, were no longer a distant threat, but a permanent corridor for men, material, and armored columns. Every day, the flow of American troops and equipment increased. Sherman tanks, M4 medium tanks, howitzers, and trucks laden with supplies poured across France. The Germans, however, remained confident in one crucial assumption. The Americans, though numerous, were inexperienced, poorly prepared for winter, and lacking the doctrinal patience required for complex operations in confined terrain. German intelligence reports, compiled from intercepted communications and interrogations, emphasized American logistical limitations, highlighting their reliance on long supply lines, vulnerability to fuel shortages, and inexperience in coordinating infantry and armor under fire. Political pressure in Berlin only reinforced this confidence. Hitler and his high command demanded bold, decisive action. Retreat was unacceptable. Failure would be perceived as weakness, betrayal even. For commanders on the front, this translated into a singular focus on offensive operations capable of producing quick, crushing results. Orders were issued with precise timetables, though in practice, the ability to execute them depended on terrain, weather, and the resilience of an opponent whose resolve the Germans consistently underestimated. Winter had already begun its grip on the Ardennes. Temperatures plunged below freezing. Heavy snowfall masked roads and trails, reduced visibility, and made movement treacherous. Rivers thickened with ice. Forests became a lattice of frost-coated trunks, obscuring both observation and maneuver. These conditions, the Germans believed, favored a rapid armored advance, exploiting gaps in American lines before reinforcements could arrive. In their minds, the Americans lacked winter training, lacked the initiative, and lacked the patience to hold in confined, forested terrain. Yet beneath the surface, the Americans had quietly transformed. Units that had struggled in Normandy or at the Siegfried Line were reorganizing. Supply chains had been reinforced. Cold weather gear was issued. Officers drilled their men in defensive tactics suitable for forests, hills, and narrow roads. Mortar teams, engineers, and artillery crews were integrated into cohesive units, capable of rapid response to armored assaults. What the Germans did not anticipate was the adaptability of these forces, a capacity for improvisation under fire that intelligence reports consistently failed to capture. The terrain itself, rolling hills, dense woods, narrow valleys, was a character in the unfolding drama. German planners saw it as a corridor to funnel American units into predictable lines of fire. They calculated enemy positions, assuming linear defenses, rigid schedules, and predictable delays. They failed to account for the human element, small unit initiative, the resourcefulness of non-commissioned officers, and the unspoken determination of men who had survived months of combat across Europe. Meanwhile, the operational timetable hinged on secrecy. Fuel depots, artillery placements, and assembly areas were concealed in the shadows of the forest. Convoys crept along icy roads under blackout conditions, headlights shielded, engines throttled to reduce noise. Even the Luftwaffe, depleted by months of attritional losses and fuel scarcity, was tasked with providing limited reconnaissance and air support, a gamble that further inflated German confidence. They believed in their intelligence, in their doctrine, in their ability to strike a decisive blow, and in doing so, to reinforce the myth of German invincibility. All of these elements, political pressure, intelligence assumptions, terrain, weather, and enemy misjudgment, converged in the Ardennes during December 1944. The Germans prepared for what they expected to be a swift, definitive operation, one that would demonstrate both their tactical brilliance and the Americans' inability to respond under pressure. What they did not foresee was the collision between expectation and reality, the rigid doctrine meeting the unpredictable resilience of the American soldier. In this context, the stage was set. Every map, every supply convoy, every frozen road, and every German calculation led to a single, inevitable moment. The opening shots of an assault that would shatter assumptions, test human endurance, and mark one of the most audacious gambles of the war. December 15th, 1944. The night is moonless, the forest a black void. Snow crunches under boots, brittle beneath frozen tires. German units begin final assembly along secondary roads, forest tracks barely wide enough for armored columns. Every vehicle, every truck, every Panther and Tiger tank is positioned to strike at first light. Engineers check bridges, ice-thickened rivers, and road conditions. Delays, they believe, are unlikely. The Americans, they assume, will crumble under a sudden, coordinated assault. The German formations are a mix of veterans and hastily reconstituted units. The Waffen-SS, elite panzer divisions, and remnants of army infantry share the same objective: a rapid penetration of the Ardennes and the capture of key crossroads at Bastogne, Saint-Vith, and Houffalize. Fuel is scarce, every liter calculated. Ammunition stocks are meticulously rationed. Radio silence is enforced. Messages travel only when essential. German confidence is high, bolstered by intelligence reports indicating sparse American presence and low morale in winter conditions. American units, however, are positioned with quiet determination. Infantry regiments occupy defensive lines along ridges and villages, patrols probing forest edges. Artillery observers scan the terrain with cold, unblinking eyes. Sherman tanks and half-tracks are concealed behind snow-laden trees, engines muffled. American logistics are stretched, but supply depots are camouflaged, fuel caches strategically placed, and reserves held in depth. Morale is cautious but steady. These men have endured months of combat in France and Belgium and have learned the value of patience under fire. The Ardennes itself is deceptive. Hills rise and fall in a rolling pattern. Dense forests obscure lines of sight, but also limit maneuver. Narrow roads funnel vehicles, creating predictable choke points. Streams, frozen in parts and swollen in others, act as natural barriers. Snow and ice cover any advantage of speed, forcing even the fastest vehicles to follow careful routes. German planners count on surprise and speed, believing the Americans cannot respond rapidly in this restrictive terrain. They underestimate both the resolve and adaptability of the units arrayed before them. Weather compounds the challenge. Temperatures dip below -10 degrees Celsius at night, frost cracking over every surface. Fog rises from the valleys at dawn, reducing visibility to barely 50 meters. Snow falls intermittently, muffling the sounds of movement, concealing approach, but also slowing vehicles, jamming tracks, and freezing mechanisms. These conditions, the Germans argue, favor their trained winter assault units. Yet the same conditions test the stamina, visibility, and coordination of any attacking force, particularly one reliant on rapid armored thrusts. Leadership plays a pivotal role. Field commanders like Generaloberst Walter Model and SS Obergruppenführer Sepp Dietrich meticulously review maps and timetables, confident that their orders are precise and their enemy predictable. Radios are keyed for strict coordination. Infantry follows predetermined routes. Tanks are to advance along designated roads in sequence. The assumption is that deviation is a risk, rigidity is discipline, and discipline is victory. Yet rigidity also invites error when terrain, weather, or enemy action deviates from the plan. American leadership is more adaptive. Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, Colonel William Roberts, and other mid-level commanders understand the limitations of their forces and the terrain. They establish fallback positions, pre-designated rally points, and mobile artillery fire plans. Reconnaissance patrols identify potential avenues of approach. Communications, while vulnerable, are redundant, ensuring that units can coordinate even under partial disruption. Morale is built not on invincibility, but on preparation, on the knowledge that improvisation and persistence can blunt even a superior assault. The stage is set in the Ardennes. German confidence is absolute. A rapid strike, decisive victories, and a collapse of American resistance. American soldiers, spread across valleys and ridges, are quietly alert, prepared for both the worst and the unexpected. Snow, fog, narrow roads, and frozen rivers will become both shield and trap. By the morning of December 16th, every man, every vehicle, every unit is in position. The Germans believe victory is inevitable. The Americans brace for survival. In the silence of the pre-dawn forest, the first shadow of history stretches across the frozen ground. The collision is imminent. Men stood in the snow, their breath fogging in the frozen morning air, gloves shredded by frost, faces streaked with soot and ice. They waited. On the German side, veterans of previous campaigns bore the confidence of experience, tempered by exhaustion. Inexperienced conscripts shivered behind them, wide-eyed, clutching rifles that had never tasted battle. Officers barked orders, their voices sharp against the wind, unaware of the fragility hidden in their ranks. American soldiers, dug in along ridges and villages, felt the same cold bite. Many had fought in Normandy, some in France and Belgium. Yet the Ardennes was unfamiliar, dense, treacherous. Nerves taut, fingers stiff, they loaded magazines, checked mortars, and peered through snow-dusted scopes. Every man knew the cost of failure, death or capture. Yet, beneath the fear, there was resolve. The human spirit, raw and fragile, had been tempered in previous battles. Civilians, too, bore witness. Belgian villagers, trapped between advancing armies, evacuated homes or hid in cellars. Snow-muffled screams, the sudden roar of tanks and artillery echoing against frozen walls. Each miscalculation, each missed signal would cost lives, German, American, and civilian alike. The human toll was not measured in statistics yet, but in tension, exhaustion, and anticipation. Every heartbeat was an unwritten casualty. 2. Tactical reality, approximate, 270 words. The Ardennes offered both opportunity and peril. Narrow roads funneled armored units, creating choke points. Dense forests restricted visibility, masking movements but also slowing advances. The Germans counted on surprise and speed, assuming Americans would respond rigidly, retreating along predictable lines. Tanks rumbled along frozen tracks, artillery emplacements calculated for rapid bombardment, infantry advancing in sync with mechanized columns. For the Americans, these same conditions demanded adaptation. Infantry patrolled forest edges, using the terrain for concealment. Engineers reinforced bridges and cleared obstacles in anticipation of enemy advances. Sherman tanks were positioned to dominate narrow roads, creating kill zones. Artillery observers scouted ridgelines, ready to bring down fire within seconds of detecting movement. Both sides faced constraints. Resupply was difficult. Roads were slick, snow limiting both mobility and communication. Radios cracked, engines choked on the cold. Mistimed coordination could strand units, leaving them exposed. Tactical reality, rigid on paper, became fluid on the ground. Decisions were measured in seconds. Hesitation could become catastrophe. 3. Technological limitations approximate 260 words. Mechanized warfare defined the battle, yet technology was far from infallible. German tanks, Panthers, Tigers, and Mark IVs, were formidable on open terrain, but in narrow forest roads, their size and weight became liabilities. Fuel shortages limited sustained operations. Mechanical failures were frequent. Engines choked in the cold, tracks froze. Maintenance crews worked feverishly, yet every breakdown delayed the offensive and increased vulnerability. American Shermans, lighter and faster, were prone to overheating and armor penetration issues. Anti-tank weapons were limited. Crews relied on positioning, ambushes, and coordination with artillery. Radios were temperamental in extreme cold. Night operations, already difficult, were made more complex by dense fog and snow, reducing observation and increasing the risk of friendly fire. Artillery and mortar support, crucial for both sides, faced logistical challenges. Ammunition had to be transported over icy roads. Deployment was slow under fire. Even communication relied on lines vulnerable to destruction, misrouting, or interception. Technology offered power, but only when paired with human initiative and coordination. On the frozen battlefield, machinery alone could not guarantee victory. Commanders on both sides faced the frozen Ardennes with tension etched into every line of their maps. German generals, including Model and Dietrich, issued orders with meticulous precision. Timetables dictated every movement down to the minute. Tanks were to advance along predetermined roads. Infantry was to secure villages before dawn. Artillery was to neutralize any anticipated counterattacks. Confidence was absolute. The Germans believed the Americans would falter under coordinated pressure, as predicted by intelligence. Yet rigidity carried its own risk. When roads became clogged, when snow slowed armored columns, adjustments had to be improvised, but improvisation was discouraged. Orders were absolute. Deviation was considered failure. Leadership was top-down, disciplined, and overconfident. Every misstep by subordinate units risked the collapse of the operational timetable. American leaders, by contrast, embraced flexibility. Colonel William Roberts at St. Vith and Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe at Bastogne recognized the impossibility of predicting every German move. They decentralized command, empowering subordinates to act independently. Artillery positions shifted in response to armored probes. Infantry reinforced threatened points on the fly. This adaptability allowed smaller units to hold critical positions against numerically superior forces. Leadership was not only about issuing orders, but about reading uncertainty. German command sought control through precision. American command sought resilience through improvisation. The contrast would become a decisive factor as the battle unfolded. 5. Enemy miscalculations approximate 260 words. German assumptions were precise, yet fundamentally flawed. Intelligence reports claimed weak American presence and low morale. Supply shortages were expected to immobilize them. Observers noted inexperienced officers, and terrain was assumed to restrict defensive maneuvers. These miscalculations formed the foundation of the German plan, a rapid, overwhelming strike that would shatter resistance before reinforcements could arrive. In reality, American forces had learned the lessons of previous campaigns. Soldiers were positioned defensively along ridges and towns, ready to exploit choke points. Engineers reinforced bridges. artillery observers maintained constant vigilance. Supply lines, though stretched, were reinforced with hidden caches. Radio networks ensured communication even under enemy fire. The Germans also underestimated American willingness to engage under extreme conditions. They expected hesitation. They encountered determination. Every maneuver, every ambush, every improvised defense surprised them. Snow and fog, intended as advantages, revealed hidden positions and slowed columns into predictable patterns that the Americans exploited. Misjudgment was costly. German armor, designed for rapid breakthroughs, became exposed. Infantry units, relying on assumptions of American collapse, faced well-prepared positions. Every miscalculation compounded the risk of failure, turning confidence into vulnerability. 6. Psychological strain, approximate 270 words. The forest weighed heavily on the minds of soldiers. On the German side, the expectation of swift victory became a source of tension. Men knew the stakes. Failure would not only reflect personal inadequacy, but jeopardize the entire offensive. Exhaustion from weeks of forced marches, combined with extreme cold, created an invisible pressure. Mistakes were magnified in importance. Every misstep a potential catastrophe. American troops faced a different strain. Defending against a surprise offensive in winter conditions, surrounded by enemy armor and artillery, demanded constant vigilance. Sleep was broken by intermittent artillery fire. Fingers numbed by cold struggled to maintain equipment. Fear and uncertainty were constant companions. Yet discipline and preparation tempered panic. Small successes, repelling an armored probe, holding a crossroads, sustained morale. Commanders also bore psychological burdens. German officers were responsible for coordinating complex movements over difficult terrain in limited time. Failure carried not only tactical but personal consequences, amplified by Hitler's scrutiny. American leaders, though not threatened with reprisal, had to make life-and-death decisions in real time, balancing orders with the reality on the ground. The forest itself became a psychological actor. Fog limited sight, snow distorted sound, and silence carried the weight of anticipation. Every shadow could conceal an enemy, every creaking tree a threat. Soldiers on both sides internalized the tension, measuring not just the enemy but the environment, the cold, and the uncertainty. By the morning of December 16th, human endurance, tactical awareness, and mental fortitude would be tested beyond prior experience. The collision of miscalculation, confidence, and resolve was imminent. December 16th, 1944. 5:30 hours. The Ardennes forest shrouds itself in pre-dawn fog. German units begin their advance. SS Panzer divisions, including the 1st and 2nd Panzer divisions, move along icy secondary roads, flanked by infantry in half-tracks. Tigers and Panthers rumble, engines subdued to avoid early detection, metal tracks grinding against frozen ruts. Fuel is rationed, ammunition counted, orders memorized to the second. Every man believes the first push will shatter American resistance. The initial artillery barrage begins at 5:45. German 150 mm and 105 mm howitzers fire over the ridges toward American positions. Snow muffles the sound at first, but echoes carry through the valleys, rattling windows in remote villages. Mortar rounds land in the outskirts of Bastogne and Saint-Vith. Infantry regiments advance behind the protective shelling, weapons at the ready, boots sinking in snow. The Germans anticipate minimal resistance, a few riflemen, a scattering of anti-tank obstacles, and a retreating enemy. American units are alert but underprepared for the scale. At Bastogne, the 101st Airborne Division, commanded by Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, braces for contact. Soldiers hunker in foxholes, men freezing in place, weapons prepped. Artillery observers monitor ridge lines, binoculars sweeping through fog, radios buzzing intermittently with reconnaissance reports. By 6:15, patrols report shadows of tanks moving along the main road to the north. The American response begins. Mortar fire targets forest edges, machine guns sweep approaches, and small anti-tank teams occupy concealed positions along choke points. By 6:45, the first German tanks reach the crossroads near St. Vith. Panthers, laden with fuel and ammunition, trundle forward, their commanders relying on strict timetables. Infantry follows in parallel columns, trained to secure villages within minutes. The American defenders engage. Anti-tank rounds strike the lead vehicles. Rifles and machine guns halt infantry movement. A Panther turret is immobilized by a well-placed bazooka shot. Confusion spreads through the German column as orders lag behind the unfolding chaos. Simultaneously, SS Panzergrenadier units encounter unexpected resistance in smaller villages along secondary routes. Houses fortified with sandbags and fieldworks create kill zones. German commanders issue urgent radio corrections, but fog and static delay messages. A Tiger tank becomes trapped on a snow-covered incline, exposed to concentrated fire from American Sherman tanks concealed behind trees. The first fatal miscalculations emerge. By mid-morning, the offensive momentum slows. German units, confident in intelligence reports, face a defensive network that exceeds expectations. Roads are clogged with immobilized vehicles. Snow has concealed trenches and anti-tank obstacles. And American artillery rains sporadic but precise fire along predictable avenues of advance. The initial element of surprise is fading. Morale becomes a factor. German soldiers, trained to expect rapid success, hesitate under unseen fire. Commanders attempt to coordinate armored thrusts, but fog and disrupted communications magnify the challenge. Soldiers hunker behind trees, rifles raised, waiting for orders that arrive too late. On the American side, defenders adapt to the changing landscape, reinforcing weak points and exploiting immobilized enemy vehicles. The frozen forest becomes a labyrinth of opportunity and peril. By 11 o'clock hours, the Germans have advanced only a fraction of the expected distance. Panther and Tiger columns, separated by immobilized trucks and snow-choked roads, struggle to maintain cohesion. Infantry units are forced into direct engagement in villages they anticipated would fall quickly. Casualties mount, yet the Americans hold. Supplies run low. Ammunition is rationed carefully, but determination does not waver. The first phase of the German offensive, a rapid, decisive strike, has begun to stall. The Ardennes, deceptive and unforgiving, asserts its presence. Snow, fog, narrow roads, and human ingenuity have turned the anticipated blitzkrieg into a grinding engagement. Every minute brings new decisions, new improvisation, and the first signs that German confidence may have overreached. By noon, the forest is littered with stalled vehicles, burned-out tanks, and scattered infantry. The Americans have absorbed the initial shock, reorganized under fire, and prepared for a counter-response. The first cracks in the German plan are visible, though commanders may not yet fully comprehend the implications. The collision between expectation and reality has begun. December 16th, 1944, 12:30 hours. The Ardennes forest is a theater of fog, snow, and relentless tension. German columns, slowed by immobilized vehicles and concealed obstacles, struggle to regroup. Commanders issue frantic orders over static-filled radios. Panthers and Tigers inch forward along icy roads, engines roaring in frustration. Infantry units press through villages expecting surrender, only to meet concentrated rifle and machine gun fire. At Bastogne, Brigadier General McAuliffe observes the battlefield from a snow-dusted ridge. American artillery is repositioned rapidly, exploiting gaps in the German advance. Every immobilized tank and trap truck becomes both a target and a shield, as defenders coordinate fire from concealed positions. The German timetable collapses under the weight of terrain, weather, and unexpected resistance. By 1300 hours, the first major engagement erupts near St. Vith. The 18th Volksgrenadier Division faces a determined American defense. Sherman tanks, supported by infantry, ambushed German armor attempting to cross the main road. A Tiger tank, one of the heaviest in the offensive, is disabled by a bazooka round striking its side armor at point-blank range. Confusion spreads through the German ranks. Orders arrive late. Units hesitate or misinterpret commands. Communication failures magnify the chaos. Meanwhile, SS Panzer divisions attempt to encircle American positions. Narrow roads, snow, and fog slow armored thrusts, forcing tanks into predictable paths. American artillery observers adjust fire in real time. Mortar teams coordinate strikes that halt infantry movements, while small anti-tank teams target lead vehicles. The forest becomes a deadly maze where German confidence clashes with American ingenuity. By 1500 hours, casualties mount on both sides. German infantry face relentless fire. Armor is bogged down or destroyed, and vehicles block each other in choke points. American units adapt continuously, reinforcing weak points, rotating fresh men into exposed positions, and exploiting immobilized German armor. The psychological weight of unexpected resistance begins to erode German morale. Officers struggle to maintain order, shouting over engines, gunfire, and wind. At Hofelize, secondary German thrust encounters a similar reality. Snow-covered roads funnel tanks into narrow kill zones prepared by the 7th Armored Division. Every advance is contested, every maneuver slowed. By late afternoon, entire German columns have lost cohesion. Tanks sit abandoned or burning. Infantry is forced into defensive crouches, taking cover where they had intended to advance. By 1700 hours, the Germans recognized the offensive's first critical failure. Timetables shattered, key objectives unreached, and reserves delayed. Communication breakdowns prevent coordinated response. American defenders, though exhausted, maintain discipline and flexibility. Every miscalculation, previously theoretical, now has immediate consequences. As twilight descends at 1730, the Ardennes forest is a tableau of destruction and determination. Snow reflects the glow of fires. Armored hulks are silhouetted against darkened villages, and the smoke of engines and mortars hangs in frozen air. German commanders attempt to regroup, but terrain and weather frustrate every plan. Small units operate in isolation, improvising under pressure. The initial audacity of the offensive has collided with reality. By nightfall, the first phase of the German attack has stalled entirely. American positions remain largely intact. Key crossroads are held. German confidence, once absolute, is replaced by calculation and uncertainty. Units are scattered, supplies stretched, and morale strained. Commanders confront the first evidence that victory is not guaranteed, that American adaptability and tenacity can offset numerical and technological advantage. The Ardennes has imposed its own rule. Snow, forest, fog, and the human will are as decisive as tanks, artillery, and doctrine. The battle is far from over, but the turning point has passed. The Germans, certain of victory at dawn, now face a struggle defined by improvisation, resilience, and the relentless pressure of a determined enemy. The collision between expectation and reality has irrevocably begun. The snow-draped Ardennes is quiet now, but not empty. The forest bears the scars of the morning's violence. Tracks carved into frozen earth, smoldering vehicles, shattered trees, and scattered equipment. German columns, once confident and orderly, are fragmented. Panthers and tigers lie abandoned in ditches or burned out along narrow roads. Trucks, immobilized by snow or destroyed by American fire, form a chaotic lattice of metal and timber. Infantry units huddle in small pockets, improvising defenses as night falls. Casualty reports trickle back to command posts. For the Germans, losses are substantial but uneven. Early estimates indicate that entire companies of Volksgrenadiers and SS troops are reduced to half strength or less. Armor losses are acute. The 1st SS Panzer Division reports over 20 tanks damaged or destroyed in the first day alone. Tigers, thought invincible on paper, are stranded or pierced by bazookas, 57 mm anti-tank rounds, and well-placed artillery fire. Fuel shortages compound the problem. Abandoned vehicles cannot be recovered, leaving armored thrusts stalled. American casualties are significant but manageable. The 101st Airborne at Bastogne reports wounded and frostbite cases, yet defensive positions hold. Sherman tanks, lighter and more mobile, sustain damage but remain operational. Infantry units, reinforced by engineers and artillery, absorb shocks without ceding ground. Coordination between units, though stressed, proves resilient. Morale, tempered by preparation and prior experience, prevents collapse. Operational consequences are immediate. German plans for rapid seizure of Bastogne, Saint-Vith, and Houffalize falter. Timetables collapse, and reserves intended for exploitation are delayed or rerouted. Confusion spreads through higher command. Messages arrive late, orders are misinterpreted, and terrain obstructs the concentration of firepower. The first day's offensive, designed to secure decisive victories, ends with a tactical stalemate at critical nodes. Logistical strain becomes apparent. Fuel shortages, frozen roads, and destroyed vehicles limit the German capacity to sustain the offensive. Ammunition, already rationed, must be carefully allocated to critical points, leaving other units vulnerable. The weather, initially viewed as an ally for rapid advancement, now hinders mobility and supply lines. German confidence, rooted in intelligence reports and doctrinal expectation, begins to show cracks under operational pressure. For the Americans, the immediate aftermath is one of cautious consolidation. Units rotate men to relieve exhaustion, reposition artillery to cover vulnerable approaches, and recover disabled vehicles where possible. Casualty evacuation proceeds under fire, medics operating in freezing conditions. Supply lines, though stretched, are reinforced through hidden caches and improvisation. Each success, however small, strengthens resilience and complicates German calculations. By nightfall, the Ardennes has shifted from a stage for rapid German triumph to a battlefield of attrition. The initial audacity of the offensive has been blunted. Commanders on both sides adjust plans, recalibrate expectations, and prepare for the prolonged struggle that will define the coming days. The first day's cost is visible not only in the destroyed machinery and wounded soldiers, but in the fracture of German confidence and the hard-earned determination of the American defenders. December 17th to 18th, 1944. The Ardennes Forest is no longer merely a battlefield. It has become a measure of endurance, adaptation, and shattered assumptions. German commanders confront the consequences of their initial miscalculations. Field reports arrive piecemeal. Armored columns stalled or destroyed, infantry units pinned, supply shortages acute. Confidence in the intelligence that had guided the offensive wavers. The belief in a rapid American collapse is revealed as an illusion. Strategically, the failed initial thrust reshapes German plans. Bastogne remains in American hands. Saint-Vith continues to hold, preventing the intended breakthrough toward Liège. Timetables dissolve into improvisation, and reserves intended to exploit victories are delayed or misallocated. The operational advantage, once presumed absolute, has eroded. Commanders such as Model and Dietrich face difficult choices. Continue the offensive at escalating risk or consolidate positions and preserve the remnants of their forces. The human dimension compounds the strain. Soldiers, both German and American, endure freezing temperatures, scarce rations, and the psychological weight of continuous fire. German troops, trained for rapid triumph, are now engaged in grinding attrition. Letters and diaries reveal frustration and fear. Confidence falters as expectations clash with reality. Officers struggle to maintain cohesion, while American defenders, though exhausted, exhibit discipline born of preparation and improvisation. Casualty reports crystallize the toll. German losses in the opening days include hundreds of dead and wounded in infantry, multiple armored vehicles destroyed, or inoperable, and significant attrition in elite SS formations. American casualties are lower but mounting. Frostbite, wounds, and stress weigh on men already stretched thin. The battle demonstrates that numbers, training, and doctrine do not guarantee success against determined, adaptable opposition. Psychologically, the failure is profound. German leadership had placed absolute faith in surprise, speed, and doctrinal superiority. The resistance encountered challenges that confidence alone could not overcome. Hitler's expectation of swift victory becomes increasingly unrealistic, forcing commanders into reactive decisions under intense scrutiny. Morale, once a strategic asset, becomes precarious. Misjudgments are amplified in consequence. On the American side, the aftermath reinforces operational doctrine. Adaptation, decentralized command, and the effective use of terrain emerge as decisive factors. The success of small unit improvisation and the resilience of troops under pressure validate training, preparation, and leadership. The ability to absorb shock, counterattack, and exploit terrain becomes a lesson in practical warfare for both sides. By the end of the second day, the Ardennes has irrevocably shifted the perception of the battle. The Germans, certain of victory, confront a reality where meticulous planning meets the unpredictability of terrain, weather, and human resolve. The Americans, underestimated and pressed, have demonstrated that resilience and adaptability can blunt even the most confident offensive. The forest itself stands witness, silent and unyielding, to the failure of assumptions and the endurance of human determination. The first phase of the battle has concluded, but its consequences will ripple beyond immediate casualties and destroyed units. German overconfidence has been tempered, strategic options narrowed, and psychological pressure intensified. For the Americans, every held crossroads and repelled assault reinforces the capacity to endure, adapt, and ultimately prevail.